Hi again, everyone. As we transition from FreshTrack to the new platform, which is called Service Insights on Meal Connect, we're also going to be incorporating some new data elements into the intake process because the new system is a lot more flexible for customizations. These are the 4 required data elements plus dietary restrictions, which is optional, but we figured a lot of you wanted to use that, so we did include it here. But the 4 data elements before that are required. In this video, I'm going to explain how we arrived at these data points as important and what we're hoping to gain from asking them. And then at the end, I'll touch on some of the additional questions that your agency may be able to ask. So we are adding race, ethnicity, SNAP receipt, employment status, disability status, and then if your agency chooses, you can also track dietary restrictions. So why are we adding new data points? Well, the food bank is committed to reaching underserved populations within our service area in partnership with you all, our partner agencies. We aren't going to be able to determine whether we're reaching these underserved populations if we don't ask for certain data points. I do want to call out as well that clients will have the option to say, I prefer not to answer for all of these additional questions. So the client always has the option to choose not to answer something. You just have to ask it as an agency of your clients. I also want to point out that we're not asking questions just for the sake of asking them. We know it's going to add time and burden to volunteers and staff doing intake as well as to clients if we add additional questions. So each of these questions was carefully chosen. And in my ideal world, maybe we would have asked more questions. There are certainly things that would be interesting to know, but they're not crucial. So these are the ones that we have decided are really important for some reason. And I'll explain more about that in some of these later slides. I also just want to flag that we may be able to wait until the 2nd or 3rd visit to ask some of these questions. So Service Insights on Meal Connect has a feature known as progressive intake, which is really cool. It means just what I said, that the first visit might only ask a limited number of questions. And then on the 2nd visit, once someone already has most of their information in the system, maybe then it asks about employment status or something like that. I talked about wanting to serve underserved populations better. So what's our baseline for this? Well, there was a study that Horn Research conducted for us in February 2021 to identify underserved populations in our service area, which is Broome, Chemung, Schuyler, Steuben, Tioga, and Tompkins counties. And these are the 5 that she identified: people with disabilities, low-income workers, children ages 0 to 4, certain geographic areas, and certain racial, ethnic, and cultural identities. So if you look at these 5 areas, children 0 to 4 is basically covered in FreshTrack right now. In most cases, folks are filling in ages or dates of birth for household members. So you would know if a child is 4 versus if they're 17. There are some cases where you might just have placeholder children entered. So all you know is that they are a child. You don't know what age they are, which is fine. But for the most part, we do have more information, and so we are able to determine who's in that 0 to 4 category. In certain geographic areas, that's also covered. We have addresses for most people in FreshTrack. Even if they don't provide an address, they usually provide a road or at least a zip code. So we also have a pretty good sense of what geographic region folks are in. But if you look at these other categories, people with disabilities, we don't ask anything about disability status right now. Low-income workers, we don't ask about income or employment status. And then racial, ethnic, and cultural identities, we aren't asking about that either. So moving into a deep dive on the specific things that we are adding in. Race and ethnicity, this is something that Feeding America has identified as a recommended core data element. So this is something they suggest that all Service Insights programs across the US collect. And more specifically in our region, from the Lisa Horn study, data suggested that people of color in the food banks region, specifically in Broome and Tompkins County, are underserved. So we've got the higher level Feeding America recommendation and within our region as well. And this question would only be asked one time. And this is what the question looks like on the Service Insights on Meal Connect. So it asks, what race or ethnicity do you identify as? And you can see a bunch of different options here, which I believe mirror the census options. You've got lots of things here, and then if you select something like Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish, like I did in this example, then a drop-down menu appears. So I can fill in Mexican or Mexican American, Puerto Rican, Cuban. So those are options within the larger category Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish. I believe you could skip those specific questions after you select your main category if you choose to. I'm pretty sure you can leave it at that. But this is the race ethnicity question. And moving on to SNAP receipt, this is also something that Feeding America recommends as a core data element. And there's a few reasons for this. One is that there are many different types of assistance folks could be on, but SNAP, Feeding America, believes gives the most information, is maybe the most helpful to know out of TANF, SSI, other things like that. The other reason is that SNAP is the first line of defense against hunger. And so if we are able to expand access to SNAP by offering application information to people who don't currently receive it, that's a big benefit. And I also added in one more reason, which is that you already, in most cases, are asking folks if they receive SNAP for the TFAP attestation, because that's one way that folks can qualify to receive TFAP food, is if they receive SNAP, they're categorically eligible. So if you're going to ask it anyway, asking it in this as a separate question allows you to run reports off of it and actually do something with the data, and someone already qualifies. If you check off that they receive SNAP, they're good, they qualify for TFAP food. So hopefully that helps a bit too. And they would ask this question every 3 months because it may change whether you're on SNAP or not. But the system will know if it's been 3 months since it was asked, and in that case it would pop up and ask again. And the question looks like this. Is anyone in your household currently receiving SNAP or food stamps? Yes, no, don't know, or prefer not to answer. And that's the SNAP question, so pretty straightforward. Now, if we look at employment status, the reason behind this is that low-income workers appear to be one of our most underserved populations for the Food Bank of the Southern Tier. And Lisa Horn estimated that between 57.6% and 65.2% of low-income workers are being served by the food bank and or partner agencies. So that leaves a pretty big portion of low-income workers that are not being served. So the question is, how can we reach them? And this question would be asked every 6 months, the employment status question. In the last month, did you or anyone in your household work for pay full-time for 30 hours per week or more? And you just answer employed, non-employed, or don't know, prefer not to answer. So only asking about your household, not about individuals, and there's no proof required. It's just whatever the client chooses to respond. Then we move on to our last additional data element that's required, which is disability status. So just like race, ethnicity, and SNAP receipt, disability status is something that Feeding America recommends. It would align with their network across the US in support of their 2025 outcome measures. But then when you look at our food bank specifically, there's also reasons that we would want to collect this information. Our pantry directors most frequently mentioned homebound people and people with mobility or health issues as an underserved population. So this is something that our partners have noticed. And this question would be asked every 3 months because your disability status may change. And the question is just similar to the employment one. Anyone in your household, do they have a disability that prevents them from accepting any kind of work during the next 6 months? Yes, no, don't know, or prefer not to answer. And now we get to the last question, which again is optional. I just added this in here because I figured most of you seem to like to track this information. Right now, you just have to put it in as fresh track as a note, but you'll be able to ask it as a separate question here and run reports on it in Service Insights on Meal Connect, which is great. So it can be turned off if your agency wants, but if you choose to ask this question, it's hopefully going to let you, one, serve the client, because you'll know when that client walks in, oh, they've already indicated that they're vegetarian, but it also allows you at a higher level to determine demand for alternative food options. So should you get lactose-free milk, how many people might choose to utilize it if you get that? And then if enough of you agencies decide to track dietary restrictions, then the food bank at our level, this would help inform our food purchasing and the work that we do with our health and nutrition department. So it has bigger impacts as well. And dietary restrictions would be asked every year because this also may change, probably not super frequently, but may change. And this question, it includes a lot of your standard things you might think of as dietary restrictions. So low sugar, gluten-free, vegan, but it also includes a few things that I think are really, really cool to include: soft diet and dental concerns, and limited or no cooking equipment, because that does impact what types of food people will be able to consume. So it's really nice that this program asked about those as well. And then they also have this food allergen question. So the food allergen choice, if you select that, it does give you a drop down to select peanut, seafood, dairy, and I think there's another restriction there as well. None of the other options have these drop downs for this question, so just allergen. And then there is also a no restrictions option if someone does not have a dietary restriction. That's just blocked by the drop down for food allergen right now, but it would normally appear right below that. So I just want to end by talking about introducing these additional options that you'll see in the survey. But as you can see, we already have these 4 to 5 questions that are additional. So these questions that I'm mentioning now are by no means required or even encouraged by the food bank, but we do know that your agency might have a reason that it needs to ask about military status, maybe for a grant. So we may be able to offer these questions as an option. We're not guaranteeing that every one of these will be in the system, but we may be able to add some of them for you, and we want to know your interest level in asking them. So these questions include household monthly income range, military status, preferred language, living situation, a survey question about food insecurity in the last 30 days, and additional assistance needs. Again, you'll be able to answer in the survey whether you're interested in gathering these or not, but they are not going to be required. And I just want to leave you with some final thoughts about how the addition of these new data points is really grounded in our values. So hopefully you've seen the Food Bank of the Southern Tier's values before, but in case you haven't, or just as a reminder, these are our six pillars: integrity, respect, caring, learning, inclusion, and abundance. And the one that stands out to me in this case after this presentation is inclusion. So the goal of asking these additional data points is to facilitate inclusion of folks who might not have been served by the traditional emergency food system up to this point. So that's really the thinking behind this, is coming out of that inclusion lens. But it's really important to keep in mind things like respect and caring as well when we're talking about client intake. We want to create a welcoming place for folks to access food. So I know these don't always seem to go hand in hand with client intake, so really looking forward to having a dialogue with you all as we roll out the new platform to discuss ways that we can conduct client intake while keeping these values in mind. Because I know a lot of you have good ideas as well about this. So feel free to bring your thoughts to our meeting or follow up via phone or email beforehand if you would prefer to do that. So thanks for taking the time to watch this video, and thank you in advance for filling out the survey and scheduling a meeting.